Welcome to Cogito Design, the video series where we take a deep dive into some of the cutting-edge ideas within the tabletop game design industry. When we create tabletop games, we bring together a combination of people, mechanics, and artwork. And this unique mix of elements all interact to create what we hope will be an engaging and uplifting experience for our players. As designers, we can spend a lot of time thinking about these elements individually, crafting and perfecting each one until they are just right. This video essay, however, is a short exploration on looking at the bigger picture of game design, looking into how these elements can be combined in satisfying and engaging ways. I want to look not at the individual elements of a game, but at the intersections between the elements. In essence, I'm trying to answer how we as game designers can achieve the elusive and magical ingredient of gameplay known simply as emergence. I still remember the moment when I first experienced the idea of emergence in games. I was 16 years old and playing the original Deus Ex for the first time. After a few failed attempts to storm the entrance to the recently decapitated Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island, I formulated a plan. I had found this conveniently dropped data stick, which contained the password for the building's security system. So, I hacked in and changed the allegiance of the gun turret at the entrance to the statue. Having been killed by the NSF guards a few times already, I knew that if I let myself be seen by the guards on the inside of the building, one of them would run to set off the alarm, alerting the rest, who would chase me out of the building, right into the path of my new turret friend. Unbelievably, it worked. It almost felt like cheating, but in a good way. It made me feel smart and resourceful. That was until my brother Paul told me off for my murderous ways.
You killed a lot of people tonight.
The whole of Deus Ex was filled with moments like this. Instead of having to approach problems in a single linear fashion pre-scripted by the game's designers, players were just given a sandbox to play in, an objective to achieve, and there were simply thousands of ways to achieve it. How you went about it was entirely up to you. The Statue of Liberty in Deus Ex, for example, could also be breached by sneaking through the back entrance near these shipping containers. Or you could just storm the front door going in all guns blazing. Or you could get a key from this guy.
About time you showed up.
And so on. Ion Storm, the designers of this game, set up an interesting combination of mechanics that all pulled together to create something that was greater than the sum of its parts. The freedom they granted players meant that they did interesting and unexpected things. For example, the designers didn't expect you to use lamb grenades to climb up walls, but the loose rule system allowed players to discover this new ability. They didn't intend for you to use exploding bodies of agents to open previously locked doors, but these two interacting systems allowed players to make that new connection on their own. Since Deus Ex, this emergent gameplay has become a familiar feature in video games, and players have discovered amazing, unique experiences that randomly occurred from the interplay of their systems, like wildlife attacking your enemies in Far Cry 4, or basically everything that happens in Skyrim. These stories are not scripted, and somehow they become more personal and meaningful because of it. People don't write posts like these in social media because of the stage events they find in video games. They do it for the ones they think were unique and interesting to their own game. The term that has been coined for these experiences is emergence, sometimes called emergent gameplay or emergent storytelling or narratives. These isolated moments and decisions that emerge at the intersection of systems, mechanics, and players, as they all interact in unique and unusual ways. It is not perfect though. These emergent narratives aren't really narratives at all when you scratch past the surface. While they do have an intense personal connection to the players, my Deus Ex story, for example, is hardly the stuff of great literature. Skyrim stories are interesting because we know how they were created, but if you were to read the stories in a book, let's just say it wouldn't be winning any Nobel Prizes. Which brings us to the main question. Given that this problem occurs with emergence in video games, and they have all the computing hardware and ingenious software to help them, Could Emergence even possibly work on the tabletop? We don't often have pre-programmed systems in board games, and players must do AI upkeep themselves. So, if we can only get fairly basic Emergent stories on a super fast gaming computer, how can cards and dice possibly compete? Well, I would argue that not only can tabletop games have Emergence, in some ways they do it even better than their video game counterparts. Before heading to the tabletop, we have one more video game to look at. EVE Online. This is a huge sandbox MMORPG, a kind of giant social experiment of a game that's been running for 17 years. The EVE Online universe gives players some clever systems and interesting people to play with, and basically nothing else. EVE doesn't hold your hand, it gives you a sandbox and lets you explore and create. This game has generated such great stories that they've even featured at world news events. There has been heists, deceit, and betrayal, full engaging stories that are still emerging with zero input from the original designers. So how can these full detailed stories happen? How is this so good at Emergence? Well, it's because although automated systems and AI mechanics help, the best way to create interesting stories is still to use real humans and their good old-fashioned organic imaginations. For a final example, just look at what happens when you give people some very simple systems to play with in Minecraft. Board games may not have complex AI systems and behaviours, but they often have something even better. Real-life humans sitting around a table. Dungeons & Dragons players have known this for a long time. Often the simplest games do this the best. The game Don't Get Got has one of the simplest rule systems imaginable. In Don't Get Got, you take some tiny cards and you try to get someone else to do the challenges. Like this: drop something and get a player to pick it up for you. Or get a player's birthday wrong and get them to correct you. If you achieve your task, you turn the card to the green side. But if your victim correctly suspects this was all part of the game, then you fail. Turn it to the red side. That's it. That's the whole game. But with the delicious addition of a small sprinkling of humanity, this simple system can lead to hundreds of excellent and fully fleshed out stories. Check out Quintin Smith of Shut Up and Sit Down talking for 4 full minutes about just one experience of this game, and you'll see what I mean. People create stories around a tabletop, and as designers, it is our responsibility to give them the tools to create great stories. So, whilst there certainly is a place in my heart for the dry Euro-style multiplayer solitaire, if you're looking for emergent gameplay in a board game, creating opportunities for meaningful player interactions is by far the best and easiest way to achieve this. And, when it's done well, it works brilliantly. Social deduction games like Avalon and Secret Hitler are particularly amazing at doing this. Mike Boxleiter, designer of Secret Hitler, described the endings of his game in a 2017 talk at the GDC.
And then the end of the game, after it's over, everyone sticks around. No one really leaves the table. They keep drinking, they keep shouting about who was right, who was wrong. And usually it's me, because I always am right, and no one ever trusts me, even though I'm very good at this game.
If you've played a game like this, then you'll understand this excitable post-game debrief. This really sums up the dynamic and emergent nature of Secret Hitler and games like it. These games of social deduction feel unique and individual because the people we put into these systems make them that way. Secret Hitler was itself based on the game Avalon, which also does this brilliantly. I run a middle school board game design class, and if you want to see the appeal of games like this, just look at how well loved the copy of Avalon we have is. Rest assured, the responsible students have all been expelled. People are so good at creating this emergence of stories that the systems themselves can often be insanely simple. The British TV show 8 out of 10 Cats exemplified this idea brilliantly in their Carrot in a Box sketch from 2019. The game was simple: 2 boxes, 1 carrot. Only one player, Sean Locke, gets to look in his box. The other, John Richardson, gets a chance to switch the boxes.
Do you want to swap or not? I mean, he seems confident there's a carrot in there.
Whoever ends up with the carrot in front of them wins. Sean starts the game not understanding and starting to reach into his box to take out the carrot. He has to be stopped by the game show host, Jimmy Carr. John Richardson, now knowing where the carrot is, makes the sensible choice to switch boxes, and then this happens.
Contain a carrot or not?
No fucking
You are the winner.
This seemingly simple game led to 2 different videos with a combined view total of nearly 2 million views on YouTube. This was down to the sheer brilliance of the human element put into this simple mechanic. But what if you don't have professional comedians to play with? What if your friends are a bit dull? Or indeed if you're playing solo? Fear not, because the human element may be the best, but it is certainly not the only way to achieve emergent gameplay in tabletop games. Another classic way this can be done, both well and not so well, is with the emergence of legacy-style games. These are games that evolve as players play them, with decisions in previous games permanently affecting the gameplay of future games. Examples include masterpieces like Pandemic Legacy and Gloomhaven. The sheer amount of choice available in these games can lead to the closest thing tabletop games have to a PC adventure game like Deus Ex, where emergent gameplay appears simply from the interplay between mechanics and systems, even if you're playing alone. It is also possible to create emergence outside of legacy games. This War of Mine is a great example. It has a huge book of well-written narratives and many different playable characters, which allows each playthrough to tell a very different story, with the only connection being that they are all very, very depressing. The Crossroads cards from Dead of Winter are another great way to add some unexpected narrative and unique stories to the playthroughs of that game, where a non-active player draws a card each turn, and the effects of that card are only instantiated if another player performs a specific sequence of actions. The twist being that this player does not know what these actions are. This fills your turn with attention as you make decisions, and it provides a nice way to allow players to remain engaged even when it's not their turn. There are also exploration games like Seventh Continent and Tainted Grail, which, whilst essentially static and linear in their style, are just so huge and sprawling in their design that the route and choices you take through the mazes they create can end up feeling unique and personal. However, the single best example of emergence in the tabletop genre that I've seen is the classic 1982 game Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. This game is incredibly original and brilliant in its approach to gameplay. It gives you a simple introduction to a story and then just sets you off. You are equipped with today's newspaper, a map of London, a phone book, and a book of interactions. Every other element of the game happens in the minds of the players. There are no turns and very few rules. They don't even tell you when the game ends, simply stating the players can decide to stop following leads as soon as they want to. But the level of emergence that you can get from a game of this is astounding. You really feel immersed in the world of Victorian London, on the hunt of a dangerous criminal, and I can guarantee you that your experience of playing the game and the narratives you generate will be completely different from mine. So, whatever game you're designing, my plea today is this. Remember that we do not always need to hold the player's hand and guide them through every step of the experience. In fact, if we can set up an interesting combination of satisfying and interconnected mechanics, where players have opportunities to interact with each other, then the players themselves might just create a game that is potentially vastly more than the sum of its parts.
Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. It is the first in what will hopefully become a longer series of video essays talking about game design. If you're interested in learning more about the concepts of emergence in games, we've copied some useful links to resources we used in the description below. If you found the video useful and you'd like to see more of them, then please consider all the usual likes and subscribes that help let us know it wasn't all a huge waste of time. Finally, creating these videos also takes up a vast amount of time, so if you feel you got some value out of it, please consider donating to our Patreon account to help us make more. Thanks so much!